Once upon a time, in a land far away, there lived a nameless monster. The monster dying to have a name. So he decided to set out on a journey to find his name. It's strange how that all ties into monster, isn't it? Like,
Yeah, that is scarily strange how that all ties into it because of you really it really is a case of like you need to reread it to actually get the full meaning of that.
yeah, like I consumed this series like way back, and we've talked about this on the podcast before. Before we decided to do this, uh, I saw this originally back when Sci-Fi Channel used to air anime, right? And it's telling you how old that is, and then finding the anime itself was so difficult. Um, because we
Y-
never got, at least in the U.S. I don't think the
The UK never got it, like so I had to do what I criticized others for doing, but in this case I had no choice. I had to um
pirate it.
do yeah, the pirating.
Yeah, we're a minute in. But like, it's so strange because we see this happen with a lot of series, and then before we get into it, we see a lot of these get like a partial print or partial release in most countries. But oddly, Australia, I believe it was the region for Australia, got a full DVD release of it.
No, they only got like according to reviews, it was only like the first 15 episodes.
That was the American print. Australia, or one of the regions for DVDs got a full release. I believe it was Australia or New Zealand. Because there's full box sets for the series floating around out there that got
Ah,
released.
yeah, here we go. Yeah, it was Australia. The complete series. Guess how much it is on eBay?
$337, I believe.
No, for it's actually only 180 Australian dollars, which is 92 pounds here.
Wow. Like what? The last time I looked at it was like in the 300s. It might have went down because Netflix has it now, which is
Yeah.
something I'm really glad. So a lot of people can actually see this if they don't want to read the manga. But we're talking about the manga here.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But one thing I want to say on that front is that I'm not sure if they did update this, but I think it's only in the Japanese version that you get Monster, which is a shame because people often criticize like, oh, what's better dub for sub? Like, I would absolutely put Monster in like the absolute must watch for dubs.
Yeah, I can check really quick. I got my phone here. Um,
Okay,
I don't want to play it on the actual recording. I got my phone muted, so no audio will pipe through.
okay.
Um,
So I guess my experience with Monster is like with Vex, it was due to the anime, and then obviously Fizz, thankfully brought out the perfect edition, so I got all of them, and then I went ahead and read the manga, and then for this video, I went back and reread it, and rereading it again after all these years, it's like it really showed just how amazing of a series it is, how woefully tight knit connected of a series it is, that it's just mind boggling to think that the way Urasawa wrote the story and how much detail it's almost to the level of Oda with One Piece
yeah. So you
sometimes.
have Japanese and French on
Yeah.
Netflix.
Okay. So yeah. I can still say my point. Like Monster. If I was gonna, I mean, I know some people who just can't watch dub, but I seriously strongly because I've got to say Um, Keith Silverstein as Johan is
Yes.
possibly one of the creepiest, scariest performances ever.
Yeah, I agree with you here. Like I hold very few dubs above subs. I find them both equally well made. Cowboy Bebop is one of them. Code Geass is one of them. Monster is another. Um, and all of those really do kind of resonate with me for like the era in which I was watching anime as well. So it is a little bit of internal bias. Um, I also view the dub of Dragon Ball better. Um, but that's also because I grew up watching it. Like,
Yeah.
um, I
I
do
will.
respect the fuck out of the sub, and having Goku voiced by the same person for the entirety of it, that is amazing.
Oh yeah. But yeah. The reason why I would put Monsters Dub in high regard is just for the fact that as a series, you really need to be paying attention to every single little nook and cranny about it. Like, even if you're looking down to look at the subtitles, like you can't be doing that. Like it's a series that you need to
Yeah,
100% be paying attention all the time.
yeah. I have really bad ADHD, so I would catch myself like flipping through TikTok and doing random things, listening to a podcast in the background while I was even reading this. Because I finished reading it while I was on my little vacation. And I lost a giant chunk of my notes thanks to fucking Spirit's Wi-Fi. Um, but there's a lot of background details in this series that makes all the difference, and down to that fairy tale, even like that is a prevailing theme throughout this entire series. And I adore when a series makes you think about every potential outcome, every little minute detail mattering. I love when something's masterfully planned like that. And Monster is one of those series where like you even if you don't think it's gonna matter, it's gonna matter in some
Yeah,
regard. Every
cause
character's like interconnected relationship, every little background detail in an interrogation room, every suspect that is questioned in the first giant chunk of the series, each one of them will be tied back into something.
yeah, cause to add on to what Fex has just said, like you see throughout the first half of the series, Temma going on the journey to kind of like train himself for eventually uh, confronting Johan. But later on in the series, and all the people he meets on the way and he has an influence over. Eventually, you think like, oh, you're never going to see these people again. But when oh, there's gonna be spoilers in this as well. Like you
Oh
can't
yeah,
talk about Monster without spoiling it. Like it's just not it's just
yeah,
not gonna happen. So when Tema eventually does get captured, you see all the people that he helped throughout the series to that point actually looking up and saying like, wait, he got arrested. We've got to go and help him.
mm-hmm. Yeah. Down to like
So
Gator, Grimmer, Lunge, all of these like characters that are so deeply woven into this web that Urasawa has actually put out. It's so fascinating to see how their paths begin to cross as we get further and further in. But I guess we should like start with the first volume here and just kind of work our way down. My notes end at where I started volume 5 because I guess the in-flight Wi-Fi didn't want to save 6 through 9, so I'll leave a lot of that to your note taking. But when we go through that like intro arc where we're introduced to like our main three, right? Tenma, or I guess four of our main characters: Tenma, Lunge, Nina, and Johan. Right? We
yeah,
see Tenma working up through the ranks of the hospital where he starts at, and where he's like going on this like wonderful little journey of self exploration in his career. He fought tooth and nail to get up to where he was. He was in the position to get like directorialship over the hospital itself. It's and then everything goes to shit once Johan's brought into the fray.
yeah,
And
and it's just such a morally it, it's it's so often like talked about in fiction, like if you knew that this person would grow up to become the most evil person ever, would you could you actually hurt that child?
yeah, so there's a little disclaimer I want to put here. There will be discussions about like Nazi Germany because of the time period in which this was actually taking place. From the beginning, and like the fall of Berlin Wall is really heavily mentioned in here, and a lot of parallels from Johann to Adolf. because of the nature of the orphanage in which Johann was raised. And what its actual purpose was in the universe that was created here. Obviously, all of this is fictitious, to the degree of storytelling in the manga, but obviously we do realize that, like, historically speaking, the Nazi regime did human experimentation, and it would be kind of like horrible to not mention, like, the level of which we actually see in the story. So if that's not something you want to actually hear about, probably don't want to
Yeah,
watch this video.
yeah, and I understand fully if people can't watch it, but at the same time, it needs to be said because I really at the moment hating the because I feel like Monster as a series, if it was written today, it probably I mean, I don't know. I don't know because I've not read Asadora. It was Sarah's latest work, which I said is another one of his masterpieces. But at the same time, I feel like if Monster was written today, it would garner
Oh
some
yeah, it
controver
would
con
have a little bit of controversy to it.
yeah, yeah, and I really hate like the people who are like who it's ironic. It's ironic that people want to censor the past and like not talk about these things, and yet how are they doing that by basically doing the exact same thing the people of the past uh, did to others
I
because they're
understand.
basically erasing stuff from existence and pretend like nope, this doesn't happen. But the thing is, we need to know these stories need to be told so that we can actually learn from them.
Yeah, I understand being sensitive towards topics fully. There's topics I don't like to discuss.
Yeah, there's topics I really don't like to discuss as well,
There's
but
obviously, like,
uh,
works of fiction I don't want to read. There's obviously, like, stories I don't want to watch. But
yeah, but
taking the actual history of the universe away is something that I'm not a fan of.
yeah,
And
and
I
and
go ahead.
yeah, and preventing others from discovering it and learning for themselves and deciding if it's all right for them. Uh, I, I feel the best way is to be like, look, I don't agree with this, but if you agree with it, we can respect that and move on.
Hmm. You know, if we don't learn from the past, we're doomed to repeat it, and that's
Yeah,
something. Obviously, this is told from a very anti that perspective, but it does have the mentionings of that time period and everything, because we're seeing, like, the fallout from the Second World War. We're seeing the fall of the Berlin Wall. We're seeing a lot of these, like, historical movements and people needing to adjust in society. We're seeing, like, the way immigrants were treated in those countries, and we're seeing a lot of that, even to this day, like how immigrants are treated here in America, um, where we have literal camps for them, um, even though no human is illegal. Um, but yeah, it's just something that I felt there was a disclaimer we need to mention. Um, and obviously,
yeah,
Tenma being a Japanese citizen in Germany, and during this story, obviously there's, like, some hostility there, because we still
and
have members of that party trying to retain what little power they have.
yeah, and obviously, when we first meet the director of the hospital, his superior, obviously a little bit of elitism class as well that we get with them, with the fact that he's all about like keeping the image of the hospital like this pristine, perfect condition, even though it's doing it at the expense of like
Everything around
oh,
them.
we're putting the value of one person over another, which completely goes against Tenma's ideology. Like no life is what is above others when it comes to like saving them.
And while we're going through this first volume, we see um, two big plot points, which are very foundation laying. We see Nina wanting to prove to herself initially that Johann isn't evil, even though we find out later on that she knows it, but she doesn't want to believe it. And we
Yeah.
also see the beginning of Tenma's training here in this volume. And that training is with a former soldier where he's going through like the same training that we would see militaristically in that time period, where he's have to go through all of these gauntlets to kind of learn how to essentially take a life. Because his goal now is to take down Johann after watching him start his rampage before it gets too late. But obviously, as all things in manga, he's not going to do it easily.
Oh no, absolutely, absolutely not. Tema throughout the story, he's a character that I would say starts off really optimistic about his world and everything around it, but then as he further gets into this web of just like who Johan is, what his connection to everyone in the story is, what how it relates to the monster inside him is growing. Like you see Tema go through hell and back
Mm-hmm.
throughout this story.
Oh, yeah. And the reason I brought up the experimentation is we get to 555 very quickly, or 511 very quickly here. And Volume 2, actually. Why the fuck is my phone going off when I have the ringer off?
Yeah, which is something that always this is just me being like a massive fanboy and a massive nerd. Just something that always like gives like a little twitch in my ear of like no, it's not said like that. It's when people call it Kinderheim 511. No, it's 511 Kinderheim.
Yeah. Which Kinderheim kind of leads into like young child, right? Like kindergarten age child. So they're
Yeah,
experimenting on children that are like 4 or 5 years old in this, all to create this perfect soldier. And that's where that, you know, Nazi Germany era experimentation comes into play, and at the wonderful expense of these young children to a absolute sadistic degree. We're seeing that all the records are gone. We're seeing that all of this information that could lead to an early demise for Johann and an early victory of proving his innocence, because at this point, like, Lunge is thinking that Tenma is the killer, is
yeah,
the
and
monster.
Johan is a figment of his imagination. Despite all, even later on in the story, he still thinks that, despite all evidence leading to that, no, Johan is most definitely real.
I mean, we see him, presented with pictures, photographic evidence, and massive doctoral theses on the fact that this is an actual human fucking being. But because Lunge has this perfectionist streak, he doesn't ever want to believe that he's
Yeah,
wrong. And that's
yeah,
such a
and
human trait. Like, even I am
that
a bit of a perfectionist.
yeah. I want to talk about him as well as because he's fascinates me because he might be one of the first like one of the earliest forms of representation for an autistic person in a manga because look at his mannerisms and everything, how he's so dedicated to his job that at times he can feel like an emotionless robot to people around him, even though he very clearly has emotions.
Eh,
It's just not shown in great detail, but he has like just the most photographic memory. And like I've always said in other videos, it's like it very much is like me when it's like I can get distracted and not think about other things. But when it comes to like say something like Monster, I can memorize it down to the last little detail at times, and it's like, and that's just what fascinates me so much about Lung as a character.
it's so wild. His little mannerisms where he's doing that little clicky clacky thing, where it's like he's typing on a typewriter, right? That
Yeah,
little tism, that little tick there is something similar to what an autistic person would do, right? You're
yeah,
right.
yeah.
And
Because I have those little ticks as well. Like with the hand movement, like um whenever I'm doing stuff like I'm doing it right now with my hand, right, talking right now, I'm doing like a little wave of my hand. I do that all the time,
Right.
constantly.
I talk with my hands to my own detriment sometimes, especially like at my day job. Like I can shut off a machine with my hands while I'm trying to talk, and because of a light curtain, right, a protective barrier there to make sure you don't rip your fucking hand off. Um, so like, there's been times where I've been talking to somebody I was training and then just like shut off the machine because I do that have a habit of talking with my hands, or like with a pen, I'll always constantly be like clicking it.
Oh
Um,
yeah, I do that as well.
so like those little ticks of like needing something to do, fidgets essentially. Um, it's a very autistic trait. But here's the thing that I was getting to here, because Lunge, you're right. Like Lunge kind of absorbs himself in work, to his own detriment, and you see like his family life and his everything around him kind of start to suffer, to the point where like all that's really left for him by the end of, or near the end of volume 2, is Tenma's case. Like he's essentially worked himself out of everything because he gets too emotionally invested in everything, to the point where like Tenma's case is all that's left for him to even focus on, right?
Yeah. But as well, and as well, again, like what an autistic person would do as well. It's like he gets so worked in his case that he actually starts to actually take on personas himself. Of like later on in the series, he'll be like, "I am Tenma. I am Japanese. What would I do?" Like doing that, and it's kind of like something I would do as well.
He's
Where
essentially getting into a character, like he's in a play.
yeah, 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 and obviously speaking as an actor as well. That's kind of thing as well that I that I do. And also, but also he's doing it to kind of like try and get in the psychological mind of a person. So, but that can be detrimental as well, considering he tries to do it with Johan, and yeah, nobody wants to get into the mind of Johan.
Yeah, no shit. It's wild though, because like I find that little trait one of the more fascinating things about Lunge's character. Because you see him while he's meeting with like the Munich police, what the senior kind of referring to there, where he's meeting with them, he's getting in character where he's like getting dressed and greeting them and doing all these little mannerisms, to where he's like getting better with chopsticks to try and kind of get more in tune with Timma as well. You see him kind of absorb himself into all of the little mannerisms that a traditional Japanese person would have, down to the smallest detail, just to get into that mindset where he would, even at the like crime scene, he's trying to view it as if it was Timma that was the killer. I am Timma, sitting on the couch, viewing the crime scene, and try to go through all of the motions. And then he starts to realize there in like the Munich chapters, like maybe it's not Tenma that's the killer, but he still doesn't want to admit that he's wrong.
Yeah, and it and again, like very much an autistic trait as well, because it's like, no, this is the way things are. We can't have it being any different.
Right. But
But yeah, there is just so much evidence, like and I'm glad Ursula doesn't come out and say like I am autistic, because you can clearly put the pieces together yourself that Lung is definitely autistic.
oh yeah. But to bring it back to the second volume here, there's the line in there that made me like realize exactly how much this is tied into that time period, and it's essentially like where they're in that baby portion, right? There where they're comparing
Yeah,
Johann to both Christ and to Hitler in the same lines. Um,
such a good line that.
and it makes all the sense in the world to want to manufacture a new version of Hitler during that time period, because it's right when you were seeing the downfall of Germany, and you want to continue having that if you were the generals that were kind of holding up this experimentation, and they would not accept failure, so that they shooed out the original director of it because he wasn't getting results fast enough. And then the new director that ended up causing the whole experiment to fail was trying to rush through it so fast that it ended up causing Johann and the rest of the kids to kind of turn on each other, ending in that director's death as well. And then you
Yeah,
see the orphanage just kind of fall to shit.
yeah, as it's explained through Dieter, Johann was just watching all that time as it all burned down.
Mm-hmm. Which is
Yeah,
fucking terrifying. The
yeah,
imagery of like Johann just watching everything burn down around him, you know, as this fucking child at the time, a literal fucking child, like from some Stephen King bullshit, right? Just watching everything burn down around him
yeah.
after he's
It
killed the director, and forced all the other kids to kill each other.
yeah, it wouldn't be it wouldn't surprise me whatsoever if Urasawa was inspired by Stephen King
Oh,
for
there's
Johann.
definitely some for some like parallels to some Stephen King works there. Um, and then one of my favorite scenes in the entire series is in this volume. You want to guess what it is?
It's the scene when Nina or Anna has the gun pointed at the baby, and then after she leaves, it's revealed that he actually pissed himself with fear.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Absolutely one of my favorite scenes in fiction.
Yeah, which
Watching this
again,
big gangster dude, who's named Baby, by the way.
I know that is so stupid, but also terrifying at the same time.
Mm-hmm. And watching him just be to his goon, like, so wait a minute, I pissed myself.
Yeah, but this also again just ties in so well to that fairy tale story of the nameless monster in the sense that Anna is just as capable of being a monster, just as more as
Mm-hmm.
capable of being a monster as Johann, because again, it's just like the monster splits off into two, reminiscent
Mm-hmm.
of the twins, Johan and Anna. One went east because Anna went to the Red Rose Mansion. One went west because Johan went to 511 Kinderheim.
Yep.
It's
It.
just like when you really start to think about that, like it only dawned on me when I was like looking at the series, just looking up theories analysis on the actual series. Like, wait a minute, Johan and
Everything
Anna
ties.
are the monsters in this story.
Everything ties back to that fairy tale, which is why I decided to use that for the opening,
Yeah,
because it's
I don't.
so masterfully written.
Yeah, oh, just so woven deep, in connected, and and I feel like we just because I've got notes some notes as well. If I can bring them up just briefly.
Yeah. So as we get into
What?
the, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to go on to volume 3 here if you had
Yeah,
any.
well, well, this was in volume one as well, but I've just got to bring it up right now. Yoan's introduction, the scene with him, Temma, and Yonkers, might possibly be like my favorite scene in any manga and anime ever.
Yeah, it's a
Like
great scene.
just the way Johan gets under Temma's skin and just being like, I was granting your wish, Doctor. All all I was doing was making them disappear for you, saying they were better off dead. And Temma is just stop because he really can't say anything about that because he did say that.
Hmm. He really did, and like, just it's the way that Johann interpreted it that was wrong. But at the same time, he was correct in granting his wish of everybody's death there because he
Yeah.
did say the fucking hospital would be better off with them dead. You know.
And that's what makes Yoan such a compelling villain in my eyes, is that he can take your words, and even though you don't mean them,
And
uh,
act
in
on
the
them.
literal, in the literal sense, he will axe on them and be like, I can use this against this person to break them
Mhm.
down.
Oh yeah, it's fascinating. Like I honestly think that Johann is the best written character, best written villain in all of manga. I really do
Not
think
that like I've said before, not just what the best written villain in all of manga, but possibly what are like if I was to make a top 10 list of best written characters, Johan would be high up there.
oh yeah, like there are few characters that have ever compelled me to a story so much as Johann, and I do find the DID that Johann clearly has in the story, that dissociative identity disorder, so fascinating because we didn't really see mental illness depicted at at the time that Monster was originally being written. You
Yeah.
know, we didn't see it as well written as Urasawa did for any of this. Like, you see autism, you see DID, you see, anxiety and Tenma's every action as he goes through the story. You see
Yeah. You
depression
see,
in fucking Nina, watching her brother stray further and further into the darkness.
you see you see the fall from grace with Eva.
Mm-hmm. I fucking was so fascinated with her as well. Like, the character work in anything Urasawa does is so masterful. Like Monster, 20th Century Boys, Billy Bat, like all of these have well written characters. But I always fall more partial to Monster because it was my first Urasawa. Just like
Yeah,
a lot of people will, fall to either Soul Eater or Fire Force for fucking Okubo. You see people bounce around for what they enjoyed from Kishimoto. It just comes down to what the first work from an author is that you read. I see, kind of tend to like always fall towards that being my favorite. Um,
yeah, but I feel like and we've both discussed this before, like with the character monster, like I've just got to say it to people out there as well. If you like the main cast being together and interacting in almost every part of the story, then Monster is not the story for you because um you don't realize this until you actually go back and read it. You that Lung, Eva, and Nina, three of the main characters,
mhm.
have no interaction whatsoever in the story.
Yeah, it's crazy because you would think that they would at least interact at some point, right? But they don't.
No,
It's very fascinating how we essentially have two completely parallel stories going at the same time, but we also have
yeah,
them all being told at the very same time frame, right? Because you see
yeah, and
Eva go through her own stuff, you see Temba go through his own stuff, you see Nina, Lunge, Dieter, all of the fucking doctors, pathologists, the cops, they all really have everything going on at the same time. You see us bounce back and forth between them, even, um, especially like near the end of volume 4 and 5, where we're getting ready to catch up with Johann to potentially end his life, and
yeah,
you see
and
Nina and Tenma kind of actually cross paths again.
yeah, and again, this is what I feel like works so well with a monster is that it the characters generally do feel honest to God real, despite how indestructible they make Johan feel. They make him feel like an actual real person, like someone you could meet and be like, oh, I can have a conversation with this person, and then have my mind completely broken by them by the end of the conversation.
Oh yeah.
Um, because again it's set in our world
Mm-hmm.
like and just
It's
making it in
grounded in our time frame, but at the same time, it's obviously fictional.
yeah um so yeah what and I do like that about the character is that he doesn't, even though Temma is the main character of the story, we don't feel like he's always shoved into the story. He has his moments in the story where we follow his journey, and then it's like, okay, we've followed him enough for now. Let's see what someone else is doing for a good like
4 or 5.
8 or 4, 5, 10 chapters. Like sometimes 10 chapters because you have in I think it's volume. Is it volume 6 where we start the Honshu Fall part?
Yeah, I believe so. It's,
Yeah, so in that part, like Temma barely does anything in that part until the very end, and it's mostly
yep.
following Johan's portion of the story.
Yeah.
So that's what makes it such a compelling story to read because you don't feel like you feel like you know these characters enough, but at the same time you're not sick to death of them.
Yeah. Because Volume 5 was where my notes ended because of the in-flight Wi-Fi. We have the end of the Glimmer and Sook stuff, where he passes off the
Yeah,
key.
yeah, oh, and um, yeah, let me because I've got the volumes right here. So yeah, volume 5.
It ends with
So
the key being exchanged.
yeah, the key being exchanged, and
Um,
and Grimmer as well, just as a character, like even though he comes like halfway through the story, he does feel like a character in of himself as well.
mhm. Yeah,
And he could have been such a very one off character, but
and in most manga, he would have been a one-off character. He would have existed in that volume, or not even all of that volume, done his thing, and then fucked off.
yeah, and and what's so compelling about his story is that he basically could have been a yo on of himself, but he turned out to be much more kind-hearted and gentle. But at the same time, what's tragic about his character is that he was so emotionally damaged, like all his emotions were taken away from him that he just couldn't feel anything until near the end when he died. And even when his son, that's what's the most gut wrenching thing about his character is that he had his son died, and at his funeral, all he could do was smile because of the experiments that had happened to him.
Hmm. And that doesn't bode well for your interaction with society. If you're smiling at the death of a kid to them, you'd be like, "What the fuck is wrong with this guy?" Right? Like if you
But
saw that,
that is the thing that there is something wrong with him.
yeah. Well, there's a lot wrong with him, but like to the main public, if you were just like at a kid's funeral and you saw that, you'd be like, "What the fuck? I'm gonna stay away from him. He's clearly psycho, right?"
Yeah. Well, he did go psycho because he was fascinated by, well, not so much by a horrific story, more like a superhero, the magnificent, like, what was the name of the superhero again?
Something I wish I would have wrote down was the name of that superhero, but I didn't.
Let me find it.
But while you're doing that, there's in volume 3, that's where we actually see where Eva hits her rock bottom, right? And we're
Oh yeah,
seeing the act at that time. We're seeing Nina come back. We see Timma kind of like stuck hitchhiking, but the cop is going to visit his kid and just like, you know what, he's probably innocent. We'll let him go. We see Lunge cornering Tenma for the copycat death. Eva doing her rock bottom and revealing that dead man switch that's, bullshit. Um, in both the Tuesday and Thursday Boy story, where we're talking about essentially the sins we would commit to further ourselves, which is really a fascinating topic. Because obviously, like, one of them's actually the kid, and the actual biological heir that was born out of wedlock with the prostitute, or the sex worker, sorry. Um, I'm using the terminology that was used in the manga and not the
yeah,
current terminology. Um, but we're seeing Johan introduce us the Friday Boy to read all of Latin to our elderly man, who becomes a plot point in the next couple volumes where he's used as essentially bait. Let's call it what it is. To
yeah.
get Tenma stuck. But all of that is in one fucking volume. and it still had the ability to not feel bogged down. You know, when you get a volume where like, oh my god, please fucking stop. We don't need every little detail pulled in at once. Looking at you, Samurai 8, right? We're just cramming so
Yeah,
much information in one fell swoop.
but I feel like that's just I feel like that's just a testament to Urasawa as a writer, is that everything he writes, every bit of dialogue he writes, whether it's from a character or from a sort, you just get so sucked in that it doesn't feel like, oh, I want this to just be over. It's like, no, keep going on,
Right.
tell me more.
It comes down a lot to the way that he wrote the characters in this volume, right? Because I feel
Yeah,
like if it would have been like your bog standard shonen weekly shonen jump author, right? Take your Tabata or your Kishimoto, you would have, had to shoehorn 6 fights in there, or you would have had to like do a bunch of exposition on page 1 through 3, like we got with like Samurai 8, where you're reading like or not Horikoshi, but fucking god damn it, Togashi levels of text, right? Whereas there's like brick after brick after brick full of nothing but like exposition and plot dump and lore dump, and then we get into the story. And by the time you've read all that, you're just like, fuck, my brain wants to die. Whereas each one of these felt like an actual natural conversations actually furthering along that plot so naturally, because it's the way we're telling it in our own universe versus where we're trying to explain your traditional fantasy, what have you. I need to explain how this form of magic works in the span of 3 pages because I only have 21 pages for my entire chapter this week. Um, Whereas with this, it's just like I'm able to have a natural conversation just sitting at a bar or in a restaurant or just, between two policemen in the fucking office, trying to figure out, like, hey, how do we further this case against Tenma, or is this Johan character a real thing? It just well written, well paced throughout that entire volume.
mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyway, I found what the superhero was, the Magnificent Steiner.
Magnificent Steiner.
Yeah. I knew it was Magnificent something. But yeah. Grimmer just developing that alternate personality because of the same experience he went on. It's kind of like if you really think about it, him and Johan are pretty much two sides of the same coin.
Oh yeah, very much so.
Yeah. Whereas Johan represents more of the calm intellect, but deeply menacing one. Grimmer, I feel, represents the more brutish one.
Oh yeah, 100%. Um, we we really kind of spoiled here, like with
Oh,
the
absolutely. But like we said, like Monster, if you're gonna
can't.
talk about, you have to talk about it. Like you can't be like, oh, dance around this bit, dance about. No, because everything, even even things like the baby, who after his arc, I didn't think we would see it when I first watched it. After his like little bit in his story, I didn't think we would see again, and then he pops back up later on in the story. I'm like, oh my god, it's him again.
It's little Mister Piss Pants. He's
Yeah,
back. I fucking there's one trope, and I don't even think I could call it trope, but it's a recurring use here. The pencil death or the pen death, like John Wick style, right? Because you see,
yeah,
we say Tenma threaten, to rip somebody's carotid artery out with a pen, right? And then we watch in one of the interviews with the psychiatrist, him stab a pin into his own fucking ear to just like sever his brain. I never really thought that was a common thing. You see it in like Chronicles of Riddick, you see it in John Wick. I never realized like manga had this as well. Like it completely been blocked out of my memory until I reread this.
yeah.
Which, shame on the psych for handing a pen to a serial killer. First of all, who wasn't even chained to the desk, clearly. He could have just, killed him. But no, instead he's like, I'm under Johan's influence. I'm just going to stab myself in the fucking ear.
Hmm. Um. So, what volume was that again?
Volume 4. Was,
Volume four. So that would be volume two of the Perfect Editions.
no, that would be Volume 4 of the Perfect Editions.
Oh, all right, right.
Because I have the Perfect Editions as well.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah, I bought them at the start of the pandemic because I wanted to rewatch the anime while I was stuck at home, right? But no, the fucking anime wasn't on Netflix yet, so I just bought the goddamn manga. Um, so
Yeah,
this is where we see the former cop come into fray as well, right? Who's a
yeah,
recovering alcoholic. That kind of sets in motion like all of these doctors kind of starting to dive into the Johan mystery as well, and finding out like all of these goddamn cases are seemingly connected now. Um, so we're getting like psychoanalysis of the Johan character. We're getting like all of the police forces kind of starting to dive into um, realizing maybe lunch isn't all there as well, Um, but what's being the leverage for this cop to get clean is the daughter, right? So
yeah,
that's essentially the linchpin of this entire volume is that daughter and this cop, and we get to see his arc and one of the other doctors kind of go down this path of recovery and trying to at least visit, only for Johan to cause everything to go awry because Johan is the monster. Um, we have one interesting bit as well being told throughout volumes 4 and 5 with Johan kind of setting in motion everything for the old vampire, as he's dubbed, to kind of because he's rich magnates essentially. I think your Warren Buffett's here in America, kind of controlling wealth, right? So him trying to get in with him, we see uh, the the foster family of the actual heir kind of get their world rocked while he actually is like, hey, by the way, I'm your son. Here's this fucking rabbit's foot that I don't know how hasn't decayed. You know?
I know, right? That I don't know how I've not lost in all the years.
Right? Um, so with that being brought into the fray, we see him kind of getting closer. And then obviously in the last volume, we had the girl kind of Colette, I believe her name was.
Yeah,
Um, kind of just being the wingman to kind of figure out if is he the son or is he not the son of this wealthy magnate, Mr. Vampire. Only for her to be rejected at every turn once she kind of gets him in with once she helps him, and that kind of like breaks her heart because she really did like him as well.
yeah. Um, Lotte Frank. Yeah, that was her name.
Latte, not Colette, Latte. Um, but Johan also the, we find out like the original Johan died at age 2 in this volume as well, which
Yeah,
is interesting. But we also see the cop who had just set up this meeting with his daughter because he had finally progressed enough to where they were comfortable meeting back up with him, and then he dies with a bottle of whiskey in his hand.
yeah,
Um,
because Johan had to bring him up to a rooftop and reveal like, oh no, you weren't drunk when you killed that kid, when you killed that man.
also, the rooftop plays a lot of in the next volume.
Yeah, because of Johan's rooftop game where he's like teaching kids like, oh, you want to know how you can become great, invincible people? Fall off this roof and see if you live.
Child suicide. Wonderful thing, isn't it, Luke?
Yep, yep. And that leads me into one of the things that I wanna talk about. Like people often say, "What is the point of Dieter in the story?" Like after he's rescued from basically being the reenactment for Johann. And I feel like they understand Dieter as a character in that he's the kind of kid that's like I don't want to follow down the start path anymore. But also, I need to be the one there to keep these two characters in check from going down the same dark path and basically destroying themselves.
Yeah.
I don't know what your opinion is on.
I'm kind of torn on Dieter, because he doesn't really serve a whole lot later on past around here, other than being like this grounding force for Tenma. Um, but there's, I feel like he's the one weaker portion of the story. Um, he's not a horrible character, obviously, because he does serve a
No,
purpose. But I feel like he could have been a little bit more important.
yeah,
Um,
I think it's kind of the thing like he's not old enough to kind of like be woven into this like really deep psychological
right.
complexity.
He's obviously not old enough. He's not developed enough, and he's not meant to be, walking around child soldiering with fucking Nina or fucking Tenma here, carrying a sniper rifle or a pistol.
Yeah. Which,
Or
but that would be pretty funny if Dio was the one at the end of the story. It was like, I found the devil, and was the one that took the kill shot on you. Well, the almost kill shot on Johan.
yeah, it would have been cool in a way, like. But I feel like having him be this more grounding character serves the purpose well.
Yeah,
What I will say is like his role here and like the rooftop game stuff really does make him shine. And his moment with Eva as well, kind of during the where Roberto kind of picks up on the scent. That was a nice bit for him as well. He's like trying to talk sense into Eva before Tenma fucks off again. um, After she gets shot for being nosy.
hmm
But I
but
feel like that was his biggest times to shine.
yeah, that was definitely the biggest of the times that he did shine. But I think now we need to kind of discuss the ending of the vampire of Munich, where we have another recreation of 511 Kinderheim, only this time with books and people.
Books, people, and love, which is classified as an experiment by this old Nazi scientist.
Yeah.
Which is wild to think that love is such a foreign fucking concept. But I mean, I get it because there's kids in America that don't get love from their parents or their parental figures, so I kind of understand it. Uh, but fucking Grimmer really shines in this volume. As this man who's on this mission to uncover what the hell's going on, but at the same time, he's willing to just seemingly happily get tortured. You know,
And when that happens and it's like his fingernails are just being pulled up on my arm, it's like because anybody who's like tried to trim their fingernails but then it's so short that they bleed, it's like it's probably one of the most irritating things you could go through.
uh huh, yeah, yeah. I broke one of my nails down to the fucking quick this morning, and that shit fucking hurts. I can't imagine getting them ripped off one by one. No, I'm good. Absolutely fine. I, I would I would sooner drink bleach.
Yeah, don't drink bleach.
Yeah, so please do not drink bleach. I don't think I should have to fucking say that, but considering our former president said that cured COVID, apparently people are stupid enough to believe anything on in that's said. So please don't do that. The fact that there was a thing that happened in American history. Uh, but yeah, Volume 5 is where like all my notes end. So kind of bounce off of you here, Luke, for the rest of this.
Yeah, so well, I really didn't take any notes. I was just because I was just like really just so enjoying the story that I thought, oh, that when I realized that, oh crap, I haven't taken any notes. But that's just again just so powerful about it. But yeah, because I'm going through the volumes as well, and just even though this guy like this orphanage guy is doing the same kind of experiments. The fact that the kids still view him as like a grandpa, like that just I don't know how I feel about that. Like when he dies, like is it is it meant to make us feel like as as dead inside as Grimmer probably feels?
Like I find this fascinating because I was trying to interpret like what we were supposed to feel here. Obviously, everybody's interpretation of a story is different, you know. So obviously, my interpretation is a little bit different than yours, probably. But like, I feel like we were supposed to be like empathetic because it seemed like he had kind of learned that like fester helping that hatred fester wasn't worthwhile. We just want these kids to be the next generation, but at the same time, we also want them to be better than we are, right? And that's a lesson I guess he was trying to instill. We'll also try to, recreate portions of the project, obviously, but he wanted to do it in a different way and teach a different message. So I don't think he was like fully trying to recreate everything for the experiment. I think he was trying to actually raise a family in his own sick, twisted way. Because we see this prevailing theme as we go on. One of the scenes that really made it kind of stick out to me is where we saw the former, um, we saw Ava and the other dude just kind of sitting there in the like outside area where they were holed up after the other police director, right, was kind of like trying to help Timma lay low there. How that neither one of them had sat down and ate a meal, like at all. They kind of lost what that felt like. That sense of family and togetherness that they kind of long for. Because we see wealth go up and up and up and up for the one, and then
Yeah,
Ava just sink lower and lower and lower and lower to where she has no one to surround herself with anymore because she's burned every bridge that she had. And in a sense, they both did, but for different reasons. So having them sit down and have this meal kind of made you empathize with them. I feel like that's kind of how we're supposed to feel about the former director here because it seemed like he had learned from his past, but all far too late.
oh, absolutely, definitely. And at the end of Volume 5, when we have with Detective Sook, like this. When I saw this, because it leads into volume 6, I was just like blown away of just how well this twist was done, where it's revealed that the person um Sook is actually talking to this whole time about all these problems with the cops and everything, and how he doesn't want to believe that this cop that he looked up to was a really awful person. It was Johan the whole time impersonating Garner.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I saw that, I was like, the first time I was like, this is one of my favorite series.
Oh yeah,
Like
absolutely.
because you do not see that coming a mile away. But even though you can kind of get gander at the fact that this is not Anna we're talking to here, we're seeing here, it's someone completely different. But you don't expect it to be Johan impersonating his sister.
No, not at all. Original Femboy confirmed.
Yeah, I guess so. So Red, if you want a evil femboy, you've got Johan.
If you think Red's watching this video, you're out of your mind.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, I'm completely out of my mind.
well, I mean, it's like 4 in the morning there.
Near enough, near enough.
Yeah. But like they're so it's so fascinating to see how the lengths that Johan is willing to go to further his evil gain here in this universe. That I had completely forgot how desperate in his own right that he was to kind of become the monster from the fairy tale.
Oh
It's
yeah, absolutely. Well, I feel like he does want to become that, but then you see it later on in the series where he actually reads the story again and he passes out, and I feel like at that point he starts to change his motion because he goes from like I'm gonna be the monster of this story because it's a story I've repressed in my memory, and then when he actually gets his eyes on the story, it's like no, the only thing that will truly make me great is if I have the perfect suicide, because this way he literally starts to change his plans of like I'm gonna be the last one standing at the end of the earth.
mm-hmm. It's it's crazy, right? Because you're right. You
But
see the
yeah, but I'm just gonna quickly. But it just goes back to again, like at the end of that story, you just see the Johan boy in the story alone,
mm-hmm.
desolate in a wasteland. So again, even though he's changed his plan of like from his initial notion of being it's still the driving factor of his goal, even towards the end of the story, of just being
Right.
the only one to have the perfect suicide in the perfect name.
Right. Like I'm so fascinated with that, right? Because you have a character who seems to set off on this path. It's almost parallel to Kogias for me, right? Because you see the Lucius descent into becoming essentially like the perfect martyr, right? Um, to get peace for all of the Japanese people at the end of Kogias. Um, if you succeed in that is to your own interpretation. If you've seen the movies, but you see Johan try to achieve this like martyrdom to kind of escape becoming the monster while also essentially becoming the monster himself, right? Because you see him slowly change his thoughts, like you were saying, on what's right, what's wrong. Does he want to go down this path fully, or does he want to abandon it? And you see like little bits and pieces throughout where like you can see the breaking in his psyche, like please take me out before I go too far. Um, the notes left to Tenma, right?
Yeah,
Because he realizes how far he's actually gone,
yeah,
but the other psyche inside him is determined, basically, to go fully down the path of evil.
yeah. And the way I've now rereading the story, what I've always interpreted his perfect suicide of being is that he is able to be killed but also leaving no trace of his existence whatsoever. Like that's the way I've interpreted going back. But as we know, fate will always intervene in the end.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's something that now I've kind of interpreted on the ending of the series, because we'll get to the ending in soon enough, because it's such a good ending, but a lot of people are like, that's it.
Oh, yeah, and I get it in a way, right? Because you expect so fucking much when you get this massive buildup. It was never really meant to be this gigantic, bombastic finale that everybody thought it would be, right? Because you see the the lead up to what would essentially to the traditional shonen meathead be this like anticlimactic, but you realize it's going to be right because nothing in this story is meant to be fantastical, right? It's meant to be
No,
grounded in reality. Where like how far are human beings willing to go? We see it time and time and time and time again, like from cults to like serial killers to everything that where they actually desperately want to be caught or they want to not take it down as far as they are, but they see it get out of their hand. Um, But at the end of the day, you still have to reach that ending. You have to get to the conclusion. And when we get to the conclusion, it's just plain. You see the confrontation and it ends.
Yeah.
And that's how the story is meant to be told. Obviously, like, we never got it, but there's a sequel or a like conclusion called Another Monster, where we actually see like the true ending, so to speak. Um,
Yeah, but apparently, according to several people who've actually read translations, it's not. They're saying it's not the case. Although I can't really be known for sure about it, but I did post comments on my interpretation of the ending,
mhm,
which here it goes. Is that so? Johann was always someone who just who he never had a chance to know what his actual name was,
mhm,
which is why he was like the monster is dying for a name.
mhm,
But at the end of the series, you actually see Tenma go and find out like, oh, I know your mother's told me what your name is now. Um, and she still loves you, and the fact that there's still people who he's still yeah, I put it here. Johan has a name now. He no longer is the nameless monster and therefore no longer the beast. And Johan now has traces of him in the world. Johan exists, so therefore he go. So yeah, therefore he leaves at the end to go somewhere that may wherever that may be to find himself a new purpose in life.
mhm. And that's kind of always been like the interpretation that I had as well, because when you're in the system, right, whatever the system is, and everything's taken away from you, where you have no knowledge of your past life, you have no knowledge of anything before, or you no longer have a name, or you no longer have anything but this designation that's been given to you, you realize that nothing really matters to you. You're just existing to exist at the moment. And then once you escape into the real world, you try to find that purpose again. But the only thing that really resonated with Johann up to that point was that fairy tale. That's why when he originally sees it early on in the series, he's shaken to his core because he remembers the story that he was told or that he latched onto. And once he started down that path of, creating a name for himself and trying to create this life, only to, in the end, be given back that life that he never really had, it kind of broke him in a way all over again and fractured him more. So he needed to set out and try and find a new purpose since he no longer had to be the nameless monster. And once you you have that purpose again and you want to try and find your way back into life, it kind of creates its own new unique set of rules for you. You try and go out and do good in the world if all you've done is evil.
Yeah.
Sometimes, obviously, you can't atone for anything that you've done, and obviously, there's no way in hell that Johan can atone for all the sins he committed throughout the story.
Oh, absolutely not. But at the same time, it's like because the that drunk at the in the after the massacre, which by the way, the massacre arc is probably one of my favorite bits of the story.
Mm-hmm.
In like just that final confrontation and everything, because it just you just feel like something bad is going to happen, something bad is going to happen, but you don't know when the moment is actually going to happen. But yeah, this yeah, going back to that, it's like when that guy sees Johan in the streets, like threatening to kill his son, he sees the devil that Johan truly is. So therefore, he's seeing the monster. So he's the one that basically ends the monster in Johan.
Mm-hmm.
So now that now Johan now has a new way of life. It's kind of like how does he make the best of it?
Yeah, and it's hard. It's going to be a massive challenge for Johan to sit there and make a new life for himself and have to kind of go through all of this. But at the same time, nobody that was in the story escaped without some form of impact on their life, right? Everybody is
Yeah,
affected by the weight of their own sin. Everybody's affected by the absolute absurdity that transpired in the story. Having to deal with the Johan situation, having to deal with their own fallout of their own mistakes, looking to everybody that fell down a rabbit hole trying to kind of escape their own reality. Like Ava could never go back to her original life, right?
no,
Lunge could never go back after as far as they went. Timma will
yeah,
never be the same. Nobody would be able to return to their previous life.
no. Even i- even uh even some of like the most minor characters, like again we see at the end of the story we see the vampire and of Munich and his son, and they're just there just reminiscing on what happened and how they've changed over the story and how
Mm-hmm.
they can never go that back. But at the same time, it most of it is for the better because what people go most of the people that went through this tragedy and this awful horrendous event actually came out better as people in the end,
Mm-hmm.
which is something I don't think Johan even anticipated.
Right. Like there's so much. Like I never. Like when I first watched this series, like 2010, I never really thought there was a more broken but better off cast in any form of storytelling, right? Because we saw every character in this series reach a breaking point. Some of them multiple times.
Yeah,
And then we see some of them come out way better off than before, but we also see some of them have become absolutely fucking deemable. Like
oh yeah,
I'd
like
be shocked if by the end of it half of this cast isn't either on like suicide watch or dead from the
yeah.
trauma that they have.
Yeah, well, two of them are already dead from the trauma that they went through. Those being Grimmer, and Roberto. Which can't believe we've gone through this entire video and not mentioned Roberto at once.
Yeah, well, does he really matter?
Well, technically he does because he's the one that's able to do the things that Johan can't do in the story, like be the one who's like oh I'm gonna do most of the killing for Johan.
Yeah, I
I will say this though, his fight with Lunge is probably one of the best fights in the series.
yeah,
Just like the straight up guns blaze, like they both have guns and they're both like uh taking digs at each other.
oh, very much so,
Like
very much so. Like
Roberta just being like, "Oh, what are you now without your daughter in your life?"
right, like, holy shit. Ugh, fucking 11 o'clock here. So I, I, I really think that as much as I didn't care for Roberto as a character, right? Like I understand his necessity, but I just didn't like him. I think his his shit was pretty fucking traumatic. Like, goddamn.
Yeah, like he was following Johan because he truly believed in him, and then by the end of the story, he's like, "Oh no, I'm just another pawn, another life that is only equal in death."
Right. Like, it's crazy when you think about it. Like, he was so easily manipulated, but at the same time, he seemed to be one of the more well thought characters too. Like,
Yeah.
he's not a dumbass, but
Oh,
he just
absolutely not.
fell down the rabbit hole of essentially like cult mentality. Um,
Hmm.
and that falls to any one of Johan's followers, down to the kids. But the kids were easily manipulated because he essentially went down the same path that he was led on at 511. You know?
Yeah. but the adults are adults are I feel are the worst of cases because they could very easily be know to themselves like, oh, we're being manipulated here, but at the same time they they want to trust Johan because they feel like, oh, he's going to lead the world into this new age.
Um, I think you cut out there, buddy.
Did I?
Yeah, you cut out there for a minute.
All right. I was just saying, like, the adults are, I feel, had it more worse than the kids because they could have very easily seen themselves being manipulated.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think out of everything here, there's a necessity to dive down one other portion of this before we start wrapping this up. And
Yeah,
I really do think that Nina's story arc is probably the better of the two in one way. We actually get to see where she ends up by the end of this.
yeah. Just from the fact that everything she went, oh my God, everything she went through in this story, from her adopted parents being killed, to the fact that she was the one who was who shot Johan. I loved that when that twist was revealed, that she was capable of pulling the trigger just as much as Johan wanted her to, and how that psychologically broke her, and just she's just like unaware, like she seems to after a while repress Johan, but then when he starts to come back into her life and
Mm-hmm.
realize who she really is, again going on this rabbit hole of finding out where she came from, and the fact and one of the great things that I feel one of the great reveals that I think happened in the series is when she believes and everyone else believes Johan went to the Red Rose Mansion, but it's revealed that no, he didn't go, she went, but he made her believe that he was the one that went into the Red Rose Mansion.
Oh yeah, like, and not to mention like how the length she was willing to go to prevent Tenma from being the one that pulls the trigger at the end, because she's fully believed that he was meant to heal, not kill.
Yeah, and I love that about it because about like the relationship that and just the trust that Nina has in Tenma, of fact like, no, this is not you. You are not a killer. You are a healer.
Mm-hmm. And we see that throughout these series, like from Timma going down to the be not willingly, but become like the underground doctor for a while. We see him help out the underage doctor that was performing back alley medicine. We see so often the lengths that he's willing to go to, from random civilian number 82. He's willing to sit there, bandage them up, make sure they're well off, and then continue on this path, just proving Nina right at every step that he was meant to be a healer.
Yeah,
No matter what happens in the story, he is always going to be that force of good.
yeah. Even though he unintentionally created possibly the worst person ever to grace Germany in this world.
Right. Like no matter what, he is definitely not without sin by allowing Johann to live when he was originally injured, you know?
Yeah, but that's just like I said at the beginning. That's just such the that's again just one of the most fascinating things I find about this story is that um, if you could go back in time, you do not know what people who you save are truly capable of. So the the fact that if he could go back in time and say to himself like, look, this guy's going to grow up to be an irredeemable monster.
Mm-hmm.
So would you still save him? But even then, I still think Tenma would have actually done it,
Yep.
even if he
It's
knew
the
what Johan
Go ahead.
even if he knew what Johan was capable of doing, he would have done it. Which oh, he would have still saved him. Which, oh my God, this draws so again, I've got to again. I'm gonna tie it back into Dot Two. I'm gonna tie it back into Dot Two now because it so eerily reminds me of the dilemma that the Doctor has in the classic story Genesis of the Daleks, where he goes back in time to when the Daleks are being created, and it has the butterfly effect of like he knows that he can destroy the Daleks right there, but he's like, does he have that right? Because if he does that, then and he commits genocide on a race, he's no better than them. And
Exactly.
he even brings up the moral dilemma of like, if you knew this person grew up to be an evil, monstrous dictator, would you be able to kill that child? And this is brought full circle with the 12 Dots when he actually meets a younger Davros, who's the creator of the Daleks, and he's like, "Oh my God! If I save this guy, he's gonna grow up to be to be the creator of the most evil force in the universe."
Hmm. It all ties back into the baby Hitler dilemma, right? Like if you could go back in time and kill baby Hitler, would you? Right?
And
That
even though, and I've answered this question before, and I would be like, no, because it create the butterfly effect of like, if I went back in time and killed Hitler, then I would erase my own existence.
right. And like I I firmly like science and science fiction are two of my favorite things, and for various different reasons. But like the butterfly effect has always been one of the most fascinating things to me because no matter what you tie yourself into, if you change one thing, it can lead to infinite differences in the reality that you currently live in. Right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So for the theoretical of killing baby Hitler, you could potentially create an even worse monster, you know, or you
Yeah.
could create a utopia where nothing goes wrong. Is that really worth the risk when you think about theoreticals like that, right?
No, at this point in the world, if you did go back in time and killed killed baby Hitler, the world today would be a different place. Like I guarantee 100% half the people today wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for World War Two.
I don't know if I go that far, but I do think that the world would be just a completely different reality, right? Because
Yeah,
it would be. And
yeah,
we could have flying cars and the Jetsons going on, or we could have a fucking Stone Age in this year with one theoretical change like that.
yeah.
It's the same thing
Um,
for Johan, and in this theoretical that you're putting out there. Like if he were to go back and change his actions, what would what would the world be like for him? The year he lives in could have our technology now, right?
yeah,
Or it
but
could be Unga Bunga caveman era.
yeah, but also as well um the idea of him going back in time and saving the mayor instead of Johan, um it would have led to Tema still being just used as a pawn for the director of the hospital.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So
because it's like at the beginning of the series where he writes that thesis for the hospital, he doesn't get any of the credit, I don't think, for writing
nope,
it.
nope. They just take credit for it, and that's so fucking common in those professional fields. Like you do a little bit of research, and then somebody else ending up taking credit for it.
Yeah,
I mean,
but
even when I was in IT, I had that happen to me. So
yeah. But also to go back to the Doctor Who story again, like at the end, they say like even though the Daleks will cause mass destruction throughout the universe, they believe that out of all of that, good does come good does come with it, and that's the nature of all life. Is that through our darkest hours and all of that, good does eventually come in portions, whether big or small, and it's the same here with Monster. Like even though did all these terrible tragedies and everything, good still came out of it. Like Nina came out of it. I feel more stronger than ever about her future.
mm-hmm. And that's such
Yeah,
a cool little bit, right? Because with that bit of Nina getting more confident in her own existence, we see the that even the darkest negatives in our lives can kind of just bring out at least one little glimmer of hope and reality, right? Like I look back to like my own life, like there's been dark ass moments in it where I'm like, well, I don't see any bright outcome of it, and then I sit down and I actually think like, well, if I had made it this far, I wouldn't have met this person, or I wouldn't have been able to do this or that or the next thing, and it's refreshing in its own right. So even with Johan being this goddamn psychopathic monster, Nina ends up in this better place mentally, and it's such a great thing because it shows that with her renewed faith in her own life, she can continue to go on and actually make change and help other people now that her story is over with Johan. And I think she's arguably the best off out of them.
Oh, absolutely, definitely. Because Tema still, I get, even at the right to the very last scene of the series, even though he says that he's leaving, it's goodbye, it's goodbye. This will probably be the last time they ever see each other. I still feel like there'll be still little glimpses of Johan in his mind that will show up from time to time.
Yeah. And it's essentially like a PTSD storyline there, right? Because he literally went to war here throughout the series. Like it's hard to think about, given our context of war, but he had his own personal war with Johan here.
Yeah.
So he would be traumatized from that. Like all the chaos that came simply by him saving him would traumatize him for life.
Absolutely.
So what do you think would actually happen after this? Like if we didn't have another monster, kind of ending it but not really. What do you think Johan's path is? Like where do you
I
think he
think
is now?
I think where he is right now is that he escaped the hospital. Like I feel like that is a pretty foregone conclusion unless he uh or or it could be the fact that he was always in that coma until the end of his days. Like it could go either way, but I'd like to think that because Johan now knows what his name actually is, he now doesn't feel the need to be the nameless monster and can find a new path in life. Whether because he tried his best to erase everything about him because he didn't feel like he was worthy of being loved, but his mother still loved him regardless of everything he did in the series. So I feel like he's laying low, finding a new way in life.
I think he because we see that he's good with children, right? Even if it was originally for like his own manipulation. I feel like he kind of took over for the former director and started actually taking kids in, the kids that are just neglected, because through every sick, twisted game, he did seem to be, you know, at least good with that. So he does know
Yeah,
he's good at something, and he would need to be good at something,
yeah.
characteristically.
Oh, but also as well, I feel like Johan, who he was, died in the massacre, and now the new Johan, whatever his real name is now the one out there feeling a new lease on life, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of like oh my God, it really does feel like the Christ analogy again, like Johann being for lack of a better word crucified, dying for the sins of everyone in the series, even himself, and then being resurrected again after showing Tema his final secret that he had, like, did his mother truly love him, and or was she just trying to protect his sister? And I feel like the mother really didn't have any choice in the matter because they were going to take one kid anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but one thing, but So I feel like that's my interpretation of it. That he's just a new lease on life, and probably, like I said, taken over for the former director, who is for if you look on the wiki, is actually his uncle.
Mm-hmm. It's
Yeah,
weird to think
which
about.
mean which means the puppet master, puppeteer that Nina and Dieter meet is actually their cousin.
Yep, it's crazy, right? Because that's a whole nother level of fucked up that happened during that era. The
Yeah,
like you're just experimenting on your relative. How fucked is that? Um, but I'd like to think that there's some bit in there that you got. Like I said, I figure he would take over for the former director, but I also do think that he would 100% still hold on to a piece of that um, old psyche in case he would ever need to return, right? Because people that have that like break in their character never fully let go of it when they kind of create a new person. Um, so each one of them essentially sits locked in a box. So there's a old Batman story where uh, I forget how you pronounce it. I think it's Azunar, where the darker side of Batman exists as him, the one that's willing to go farther, but he has to lock it away in like this Pandora's box style, like mind meld where he doesn't ever want to go too far, right? And I kind of figure that's essentially like the same with Johan, right? That Johan would always be there as a reserve for if it's needed, but never wanting to actually dig deep and unlock that personality again because he knows that he might not be able to come back if it was to come
yeah,
back out.
yeah, and yeah, I can see that. And the perfect example of this is again like with Grimmer, developing that persona of the Magnificent Steiner,
Mm-hmm.
and when it actually does come out in the series, he's realized like there's no turning back now.
Mm-hmm. And that's just a part of that type of person that's went through that much trauma or has like DID, right? Where they have multiple personalities and they just kind of rotate between them as needs arise, right?
Yeah,
It's
but
fascinating, actually.
yeah, but you know who else I feel like would come out stronger as an individual from this experience? Lunge himself.
Mm-hmm.
Like he would he I feel like he's because he ends by being a teacher rather than a detective, and I feel like his method of teaching would be what he learned over the series, that nothing or no one is 100% perfect.
Yeah, and that's a good lesson to be passing on, right? Especially during that era,
Yeah,
because
but at the same time, he also would be teaching them like, don't take anything as face value. Look at all the pieces and make judgments. And if you're wrong, you're wrong. But at the same time, it's not the end of the world as well, which I feel again would be a great message him, uh, for him to learn. Which I think he does. Which he obviously does. He obviously learns that no, I was wrong in this situation, but at the same time, it it's kind of the feeling that I feel like he kind of needed to have happen to him
mm-hmm.
for the better.
Right, like 100%. Like he needed to learn on his own, right? That he's not infallible. And the fact that we had him go through this major development and end up being a teacher, like I figure his classes would probably be something that would inspire change in that era, right? Because we see that people still hold on to the past desperately in this era. Their, prejudices, their, hatred towards each other and everyone around them. But at the same time, themselves for what they. And that was another big thing that on throughout this, right? Is the self hatred for what they done to kind of live on. Even the
Yeah.
board director hated his actions under the regime. But and I feel like at the end he did learn, like I said. But Lunge learning from like being kind of ostracized from every investigation early on, and then trying to kind of learn the lesson of like I'm not always right, and passing that on is such a wonderful arc for him. And with him teaching now, he'd be essentially with Dieter and all of them around that age group, he would eventually get them, and he would be able to kind of reconnect to the past a bit too, in its own right.
Yeah. And as for Dio, I feel like he'll become a doctor in the future.
Oh yeah, like he would become a doctor, um, probably taught somewhat by Tenma over the course of the story.
Yeah. Tema and the older doctor that becomes basically his legal guardian.
Mm-hmm. Because well, Tenma didn't really want to deal with that anymore.
No, no.
I've held on to this child for too long, you know, and he doesn't want Dieter to go down any further than he already did, following him around. He's already seen enough bullshit.
Hmm.
But like, there's just so much wonderful in this, and I'm still to this day eternally fascinated with the series. Even this video, like, fucking hell, sitting at let me click OBS here, sitting at an hour and a half roughly. Like, it's it's really fun to dive down this. Obviously there'll be other deep dives into different series. Some of them,
Yeah.
definitely not recorded at Luke's 4:30 in the morning in my uh, hitting
Yeah.
on 11 o'clock, almost 11:30.
Yeah. Cause if you think this series could break a person, yep, we've got another series that just happened to break the British guy in this call.
Well, I mean, you got two. You got Sword Art Online, which I'll be in for,
Oh yeah, oh
and then
yeah, I've got some.
Berserk,
Yeah,
which will be probably you, Ann Arbor, and Tyler video, which will be funny to view.
more than likely.
Um, but yeah, so even though he had finally found a name, there was no one left to call him by it. What a wonderful name it was, Johann. This is the end of the poem that kind of led us down this whole rabbit hole of a wonderful, wonderful tale. I'm sure we'll touch other Urasawa works because we're simps for him. But until then,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
peace.
Peace.